Whew, I'm going to need some grace this morning. Can y'all give me some? Because that's a little bit more than grace. I appreciate it. This whole week, I've actually been in Boston, Massachusetts. I got a great opportunity to go on a missions trip down there. I was able to preach to some local people or, do some outreach and some fellowship. Just had a great time. And let me tell you, from day one until the day the trip was done, the Lord was moving. And let me tell you something, He is not done moving. He's going to be moving in this church this morning. We are going to welcome Him here to Crosspoint Church. Can we welcome Him this morning? It's not going to work if I do it alone. That's right. That's right. He's going to move this morning. He's going to move this morning because He is not done. But it was really cool to go off to Boston, Massachusetts. It was kind of the first thing I had done something like that. I've done local missions trips, but never, we traveled about 6 hours, although with a van of teenagers, took about 8 hours. So it is what it is. And we got to do a lot of cool things, got to see some really cool sights. And one of the things that we did is we actually helped out at a place or a ministry called Habitat for Humanity. And they do a lot of great things, but the thing that we are able to help them with is something called a restore. And they do something, it's kind of like a thrift store, and they have some items, but their main focus is on furniture or things that you can put in your house, like tables or dressers and all that stuff. And so we were called to help them out, and they had to move a ton of stuff around because they were doing a closing sale, so they wanted to make room for new things, try to move all the old things. And it was great, because we were a bunch of teenage kids ready to come in and help. And so they asked us, and we were able to move a ton of really big cabinets and tables and chairs. And it was great. And I found something really cool happened. Because here's a little fun fact about me. When I was 12 years old, they said I could preach down here, so let's have some fun. Let's get personal. When I was 12 years old, I was able to help at my school, and I was working as a facilities aide. And so during the summers, when I was 12, 13, and 14 years old, I did that for 3 years. And so I would help with a lot of big moving of like locker units and desks. So I was able to watch some guys who really knew how to move stuff. And I thought it was really cool because then I go to Boston, and we had to help with this restore, and we had to move some big items. And I thought it was really cool how sometimes God can use things that we learned in our past in ways that we would never imagine, right? Because when I was working at my school when I was 12 years old, I would have just expected it's a summer job, collect some paychecks. But then on this missions trip, I was actually able to help a ministry that really needed it. And I was able to do that by using the skills that I had acquired years before by helping out at my school. Sometimes God works like that. He uses things from our past in ways that we never imagined. He's a good God, right? We got a good God. We serve a great God. That's right. That's right. But when I was working on this message, sometimes when I'm working on these messages, the Lord speaks to me in strange ways. Last time I talked about how God works in mysterious ways. Today I want to tell a story of how sometimes the Lord speaks in mysterious ways. So I used to work at a golf course a few weeks ago. I had to move out because I'm going to college. But I used to work at a golf course, and I would cut a lot of grass. So let me tell you a story about one time when I was working. I was on a lawnmower, right? And I'm just cutting grass, thinking nothing of it. And then I see this little brown thing jump out in front of me. And I take a closer look, and I'm like, what is that? And I discovered it was a toad. Like a toad that was like this big, super tiny toad. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, I know what I have to do. So I stopped. I pull down the throttle, turn off the blades. I get off the mower, and I'm like, this little toad, And so I bend down. I'm trying to save his life because if I was to keep going, he would. And so I get off, and I'm trying to save his life. And so I bend down to pick him up. And this toad has the audacity, when I reach my hand out, he jumps away. And so now I'm chasing the little guy, like I'm trying to save your life. That mower's going to kill you. You just don't know it yet, but you're going to find out pretty soon if you don't jump in. Whew. Sorry, I got passionate there. I don't know what happened. Anyway, eventually he calms down. I was able to reach down, and I shoved him into my hand, kind of cupped him. I walked him over to the shade under a tree, and as soon as he hit the shade, he jumps out. And I was like, you know what? Good enough. He's not going to get hit. And so I get back on the lawnmower, and I just keep going about my job because, I was just saving a frog. You're not a hero. Well, you could call me one, but no, I'm just kidding. I saved him from me killing him, so I don't know if that counts. But I get back on the mower, and it was almost like I got struck by lightning. You know how like people say like, oh, if you do that, God's going to strike you with lightning. You ever heard someone say something like that? I felt like I got struck by lightning, but I did a good thing because the Lord said something to me. You want to know what he said to me? Or what the Lord revealed to me? Can I share that with you? Come on, I want to hear. Can I share that? All right, there we go. I had to make sure everybody's awake. I don't want to lose you this early. I thought, sometimes when the hand of God starts moving in our lives, our first reaction is to run away. Just like that toad, when I bent down, I'm trying to save his life because I saw something that I knew was going to kill him. He didn't know it yet. So I'm trying to save his life. And when he sees my hand that's trying to help him, his first reaction is to run away. And I got offended, first off. I was like, come on, dude. That's a frog. I don't know why I'm giving him this much emotional power over me. But I thought sometimes we do the same exact thing where God gives us an opportunity or God tells us to do something, right? God starts moving in our lives and our first reaction is to run. Let me give you an example. Jonah. Jonah in the Bible, most famously known for his story of Jonah in the whale, right? Let me give a very simplified version of the story. God shows up to Jonah one day and he says, Jonah, I want you to go this way and preach. And Jonah says, that's great, Lord. I'm going to go this way, right? And he buys a boat ticket. But luckily, the hand of God doesn't give up on us when we run, right? And so God sends a whale. Jonah gets thrown off the ship. So God sends a whale, swallows him up, right, and spits him back out. Thankfully, the hand of God doesn't give up on us, right? Because the hand of God will always be moving in our lives. Sometimes it's noticeable, but sometimes the hand of God is moving in our lives to prepare us for something that is to come. You know what I mean? Am I making sense? I'm still speaking English, right? Just want to make sure. Sometimes the hand of God will move in our lives to prepare us for what is to come. And I just talked about a character in the Bible named Jonah. Let me talk about another character. A character who didn't run. But instead, just like on my missions trip, when I said that God was moving from day one until the day that it was done, God was moving in this character's life from day one. Some of you know this character as King David. You see, the hand of God was moving in David's life from the first day that he was born, and David didn't run. He would always embrace it. And that's why I wanted to talk about David today. And a lot of preachers, whenever they get the chance to talk about David, they always want to talk about the big stories, right? Like David and Goliath, and David gets anointed, David as a king, or even like David and Bathsheba. I mean, I haven't read that one because I'm not old enough. But today, I want to stay away from those. I want to stay away from those. Because today, I wanted to talk about something that I don't think gets enough attention. I'm going to be talking about David's time that he spent as a shepherd. David's time as he spent as a shepherd. And I want to start off by telling a story about it. In fact, let me just walk you through some of the situations that David might experience when he was a shepherd tending to his father's sheep. Is that okay? All right. Let me check my notes here, see what we got. Let's start at the beginning of the day. Because at the beginning of the day, he would probably find his favorite spot, right? Where he could watch the sun come up. Because trust me, he was up early watching those sheep. And so he would find his favorite spot where he could watch the sun rise. And what he would probably do is play his harp and worship God. Because it says in the Bible that David loved to worship and play his harp. And so that's probably how he began his day. Talking to God, worshiping God, praising God for just a new day, some new breath that he could use, right? Then what will he do? Well, he may start off the day, be looking around and see, you know what? My sheep are all in this area right here. And in this area, there's kind of some dead grass. They've kind of combed through this. It's pretty short. But if I look over here, the grass is much greener. They got more grass over here. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take my sheep from one area, and I'm going to lead them to the next area, right? And so that's what he would do, where he would take his sheep and he'd say, come on, guys. He would rattle them all up, and he would move them into an area where there are what they would say greener pastures. There were greener pastures, more food for them to eat, right? Better food for them to eat, a better place for them to stay. And so that's what David would do. He would look around and see, you know what, this area isn't as great as this area, so I'm going to move them over here. And he had to have the oversight in order to do that as a shepherd. Let's see what the next one is. Ooh, this is a fun one. Sometimes, his sheep would be in danger. They would be in danger because as he would be watching over his sheep, he would see one stray one over there. And as he was looking, he saw something approaching it. Maybe like a bear or a lion, right? And they would come and they would try to kill the sheep. They would come and attack the sheep. And so David's job as a shepherd, he would have to run in with his sling, right, that he'd always carry around. And he would take it and he would try to sling a stone at him, try to aim for the head or something that he could do. And he would have to come in, tackle the bear or the lion, yes, and try to save his sheep. That was his job as a shepherd. Those were probably some hectic days. Those were probably some hectic moments right there. Has anyone in the room ever fought a lion or a bear? I had to check. I didn't know. I'll tell you, I've never done it. But I've always thought about it. Like you see a video and they look like you could just pet them, right? They're so cute. But then you see some other videos and you're like, I don't think you should be petting those things right there. And David knew that. And so oftentimes he would actually have to fight them to protect his flock. And then we have the sunset. The end of the day, the work is done. And if I had to guess, I would say that David probably found his favorite spot, took out his harp, and would play it. And he would watch the sun go down as he played his harp and worshiped God. Because that's something that he loves to do. And so he would get practice with his harp, and he would be worshiping God every single day as a shepherd. And I know that what you may be thinking. Like, Jared, this almost doesn't sound like David that I know in the Bible, right? Because when we think of King David, warrior David, right? He's got a grand reputation. Everything he does spreads throughout the entire nation because it's so great, right? But I'm talking about before any of that. He was just a shepherd watching over his father's flock. And he spent years of his life doing that. And you may be thinking, years? King David, the man after God's own heart, why would God subject him to years of just watching his father's sheep, right? David could have gone and talked about worship to people, or maybe he could have gone and been a counsel, right, to someone. David could have done so many more things, but instead God had him sitting, watching his father's sheep for years of his life, for an entire season of his life. When he fought Goliath, he had to be under 20 years old because otherwise he would have been in the military. So when he fought Goliath, the fact that he wasn't in the military shows he wasn't even 20. And so for the first 19 years of his life, probably a little bit less, we can guess that he just spent that watching his father's sheep. And when I first looked at that, I thought, like, this is David, King David, and God had him spending years just sitting there watching sheep. But then I thought about it a little bit more. And I started to read David's story, but this time I looked at it from a bit of a different perspective. This is where the scripture comes in, so I might want to be careful. Because I want to take what I was just talking about, David's time as a shepherd, but this time I want to look at it from a different perspective. And this is where we're going to open up our Bibles. Let me start in 1 Samuel 16:23. We should have a slide for it. There we go. Whenever the Spirit from God came on Saul, David would take up his lyre and play, and then relief would come to Saul, and he would feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him. You see, we all know that this story, Saul was being tormented by an evil spirit, and legends of David's harp playing flew across the nation, so much so that when Saul had an evil spirit tormenting him, the king of this nation, they said, "We know a boy who knows how to worship and play the harp." So you may be thinking that his time as a shepherd was wasted in some way, or like David could have been doing so much more, but it was the time that he spent in worship and playing his harp. That's what got him into the kingdom in the first place. And so they brought him in. And then we read this verse right here. Sometimes a spirit would torment Saul, and they would call upon David and say, "David, we need you right now to save the king." And so David would come and he would play his harp, and Saul would feel better. The harp playing that he did while he was a shepherd, in that time that he wasted as a shepherd, it was that harp playing that first got him into the kingdom. Let me keep going. Next verse, 1 Samuel 17:37. This time we have David talking to Saul. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine," Saul said to David. "Go, and the Lord be with you." Let me give some context here. Because now the entire nation of Israel is being tormented and mocked by this big dude named Goliath. Even taller than I am right now. Actually, probably from the height of this stage, he was probably about as tall as I am right now, but standing on the floor around that. He was a big guy, and he was coming around to the nation of Israel, mocking them. And they didn't know what to do because they couldn't send anyone out to fight him. Well, until this young boy named David comes along, who had spent years watching over his father's sheep. And while he was watching over his father's sheep, sometimes, in case you didn't know, although you do because I just told you, sometimes he would have to protect his sheep from bears and lions that would come and attack the flock. And so after doing that, probably multiple times, David began to gain this confidence, because he always trusted that God would protect him and God would bring him through. And every time he took out his sling and attacked the bear and the lion, God would bring him through. God would protect him. God would grant him the victory. And so now, when a lion comes and is mocking and attacking the flock of God, God's people, right? David looked at this and says, "I've already spent years watching over my father's sheep, and I know what happens when you attack the flock. I know that my God will protect me. I'm going to go out and protect God's people." And it was with that confidence that he said, "Saul, the same God that protected me from the lion and the bear is the same God that will protect me when I go out and kill that giant." Where'd he get that confidence from? He got that confidence from the time that he spent as a shepherd. Maybe it wasn't a wasted season after all. But let me keep looking, because what if I said that I got more? Just like in 1 Samuel 50, let's look at the result here. This is going to be 1 Samuel 50, here we go. "So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him." So David beat Goliath with what? A sling and a stone. He didn't use a sword. If he would have been in military, they would have given him a sword. But God didn't want him in the military at this point. God wanted him to trust, right? God wanted David to trust God, so he made him a shepherd. And while he was a shepherd, the only weapon that he was given was a sling. And using the same sling that he used to kill the lions and the bears, he used to kill a giant. Using the same sling that he practiced with as a shepherd, that's what God used to save his nation from this giant. Let me look at one more. This time from 2 Samuel 5:2. This is Samuel talking to David now. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler. You see, you can look at David's time that he spent as a shepherd as a waste of such a great man after God's own heart. But it wasn't a waste, because God's hand was moving in David's life so that it could prepare him for the great plans that God had for David. Because the time that he spent as a shepherd over his father's sheep was just practice in ways that he would have never imagined, to be a shepherd over God's people. You know, sometimes I wish that I could just sit down and talk with David. Because he was anointed and promised to be king at such a young age. But even after he was anointed, he had to spend years watching over his father's sheep. And he probably thought, God, why can't I just go be king? Why can't I move on from this? God, why do you have me in this season right now, God? I know that you have something great in store for me, but right now I just don't see what that is. I wish I could talk to David, seeing his entire story. You know what I would tell him? I would say, David, the Lord does have something planned for you. And he's going to use the season that you're in right now to prepare you in ways that you would have never imagined. David, you just don't know it yet. David, someday that harp that you play every day to worship God, that harp is what's going to get you into the kingdom. You just don't know it yet, David. All that time, all that experience that you have with the slingshot, protecting your father's sheep, someday God will use that to protect his sheep, the nation of Israel. David, you just don't know it yet. David, someday this time that you spend as a shepherd over your father's sheep, someday this will be your practice, your first experience that you will someday use to be a shepherd over the entire nation of Israel. David, you just don't know it yet. David, someday that confidence, someday that heart that God is crafting inside of you right now, he's going to use that to do great things that you can never imagine. David, you just don't know it yet. You know, I learned something about God from studying the story of David here. I learned that sometimes God doesn't meet our expectations, but he will always exceed them. Should I say it again for my note takers? I'll say it again. Sometimes God may not meet our expectations, but I promise you, he will always exceed them. That's right. The Lord is moving in this season of your life right now. You just don't know it yet. I want to give the same promise that I wish I could give to a young David to every person in this room. Someday you will overcome this addiction that you've been struggling with. You just don't know it yet. Someday your testimony will lead someone into the eternal kingdom of God. It's your story that'll do it. You just don't know it yet. I know it's hard, but if you can keep pushing through, you're going to get on top of this mountain and have a great view of the valley and see it was worth it. God was using it. You just don't know it yet. Someday, you're going to break chains that have been handed down through your family lineage, through generations. Someday you're going to break those chains. You just don't know it yet. I know you may not see the purpose in this season. You may not see the point or the use of this season in your life right now. But we have a God who will sometimes use things from our past in ways that we could never imagine. David, did you know that someday your sling would be used to kill a giant, the same one that you've been practicing on the lions and bears? So whatever season you're going through, you may feel like, I don't see the ministry that I'm doing. I don't know what point, why am I in this season? Hey, God is going to do something amazing through you. You just don't know it yet. But you will. Because someday you may use this season that you're in right now to teach you the skills that you'll need to change an entire nation. You'll find out.